AI has the opportunity to change numerous aspects of the customer experience.
Calling up the contact center, working with a bot or a chatbot, it's almost a meme. We need to be doing better.
Are we gaining any traction?
If we're honest about it, I think we would have to say,
you are listening to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast, or AI with ML. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining. The AI with Maribel Lopez podcast is brought to you by the Data for Betterment Foundation. This podcast shares the stories of the people behind the new world of data and AI. What are they creating? And why does it matter? If you like this episode, please subscribe so you can easily find the podcast again. You can find the video version of this podcast at youtube.com at AI with Maribel Lopez. You can also share your feedback and ideas with me on X, also known as Twitter, and LinkedIn. All links are in the show notes. Extended show notes, episodes, and transcripts can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcast. I hope you'll enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast. I'm Maribel Lopez, and in today's episode, I'd like to discuss how AI has the opportunity to change numerous aspects of the customer experience. And joining me today is Jonathan Rosenberg, the CTO of Five9. Hey, Jonathan.
hello, good morning.
Good morning. It is early morning for you. One of the great things about moving back to the East Coast is I don't do the 7 a.m. phone calls anymore, but however, Jonathan is doing the 7 a.m. podcast.
I'm on the East Coast. I'm good. This is 10 a.m. for me.
All right, perfect. For those that might not be familiar, Five9 is a provider of cloud contact center software, and it's recently been expanding its portfolio with AI and acquisitions to address more of the CX landscape. And now I've had the pleasure of knowing Jonathan for many years now. I've followed his work at various companies, so it's great to have him on the program. And in fact, I believe the last time I saw Jonathan in real life, we were attempting to record a podcast in a dark, acoustically challenged conference room in a Las Vegas convention center. So it's nice to have a more civilized recording backdrop today. So let's just get started, Jonathan. I want to start with talking about where we are today. We've talked about the contact center being an enabler for better CX for years now, right? Are we gaining any traction, really?
That's a good question. And I think now is probably a better time than any to take a step back and be honest with ourselves about where we are as an industry in delivering great CX. And if we're honest about it, I think we would have to say it's still not great. And in a lot of ways, Maribel, you've probably seen this, it's almost a meme, like calling up the contact center, working with a bot or a chatbot. It's like a meme in the world that it's a terrible experience. And you can go on YouTube or whatever and find tons of funny videos and skits about this. And I think that's a signal to us that we need to be doing better in delivering a great experience. And it hasn't been great. And if we look at the different pieces of it, customers still feel that service is impersonal. We've been talking about personalization forever, but it's not here yet. We've been trying to build self-service and automation, and I don't want to say there's no success stories, because there are some. But if you look at it in the aggregate, I think most people would say it's not great, right? That they're not great, that they're not useful. I still, agent or press one is still what people want to do. So I think it's
representative.
Yes, there you go. But that's it. That's exactly what I'm saying. We laugh because we all know. It's sort of like, I'll be honest, it's like the emperor has no clothes here, right? It's time for us to admit that there's a problem and we really need to work more aggressively as an industry in fixing this problem.
Okay, so from where I sit, this is the AI with Maribel Lopez podcast. So you can imagine that everybody rings me and wants to discuss AI.
Yeah.
And everybody claims that AI will make it better this time.
Right?
So what's your perspective on this? Is this a reality?
Yeah. So I think we finally might have the tool that can let us address these problems. And I say we may because we should only be certain when it's happened, okay? But it looks promising. But let's look in the rearview mirror again for a second. In the beginning, there was DTMF menus for self-service. And as an industry, we were excited about it. It was going to save the day. People didn't really like it. Then we had, natural language and directed dialogue response systems and chatbots, and that was going to finally save the day because you could actually speak instead of pressing the stupid buttons, and that was going to, and that also didn't quite save the day. And again, I don't want to say there's no success stories in both of those categories. There are some, but on the whole, I don't think it's like delivered the dramatic CX we want. So I think the question is this time different? Is third time the charm? And I think the answer is yes. And I think there's some evidence for it too. And let me actually give you the evidence for it. The biggest number one piece of evidence is the number of active users on the OpenAI's ChatGPT and other vendors' chatbots. Those are consumer-oriented bots, and users are using them en masse, right? So that to me, that's just a good signal, right? It's a good signal that outside of the contact center, these technologies have achieved adoption, customers are happy with them, and they want to pay for them. They work well enough to deliver consumer experiences. Evidence, I like it, right? That's the first thing we have. The second is if we just look at the proof of concepts and prototypes and demos that myself and Five9 and other vendors have been delivering in the space for using generative chatbots and voice bots, they're extremely promising. They are delivering the type of experiences that people want, okay? So I think that also looks really, really good. And the technology, like it checks all the check boxes on what we finally need to deliver on the promise that we've been saying, but not delivering. So I'm cautiously optimistic that the third time's the charm, and there's some good evidence for it. We are working, and as an issue, we should be working to see it through and actually say, yes, it did it this time. But I feel good.
I really like where you're going with this because, one of the things that we talked about before was in this whole chatbot era, there was a lot of disillusionment over how that rolled out. But now that we have Gen AI, it's starting to be more natural language. It's starting to have more context that can be pulled into it. We're actually seeing that deliver on some of the promise that we had before. Now, I'm not saying that organizations don't have to get over the fact that they might have gone through Chatbot 1.0 and it didn't really work out well, and there was some brand reputation risk they have to unwind and feel more comfortable with as an organization. But I do think that's a great example of how we're moving forward. And you brought up something really interesting, which is once a broad populace gets used to using something in their own personal life, then it can actually be extended for organizations as a way for them to interact with customers, and they don't have to train them. It's not like in this menu, we got to press 1, over here, we got to do *52 and a backflip, right? So we're getting a much more easy place to work with this. One of the other things we've been talking a lot about in this space is sort of the impact of AI on the agent experience and how AI can reduce the mundane work and create new opportunities for more high value work as well, as potentially upskilling.
Absolutely.
But there's a viewpoint AI will eliminate contact center jobs. And I just wanted to get your perspective on this because you're in the space. Do you see that as a reality that we're going to get job elimination, or is there something else going on here?
I think it's going to be the same thing it's been every single time we've gone through this, which is there's going to be a transformation on the type of job. Okay. And then I think it is definitely the case that some number of years from now, what we see an agent doing isn't what they're doing today. What they're doing today is a lot of like routine, things like password resets, which has been like the running joke, another thing that people seem to call about and why we haven't been able to fix that, or countless amount of time looking stuff up and clicking through forms and data entry. This is kind of what the job is today, right? And it's no surprise. It has huge churn and agent burnout and all these kind of things. And where I think it's going to go is it's going to go to something that resembles a lot more like what a sales organization is like. And if you look at the sales organization inside a business, like you have a wide range of roles from like executive managers to like, deal hunters, but there's a huge number of people that are like, dealing with small deals that they're more transactional, but they're still responsible for a relationship. That's sort of what they're doing. They're helping the customer achieve success with the product. They're helping the customer make a decision on whether to buy. They're being emotionally responsive. And at the end of the day, they're delivering value to the business. Like if you ask any enterprise today, like, would you like to have more salespeople? They would all say, yes, of course I want more salespeople because salespeople help grow my revenue, prevent churn or whatever. So I think what's going to happen is that as our automation and AI does a better job taking all this mundane stuff away, what you're left with is those roles look like a new layer in the sales ladder, right? That's dealing with customers, that's helping drive closure of deals, securing of leads, helping prevent customers from churning, providing a point of contact, and doing it at scale, right? So if you think about it today, Maribel, if you're like a B2C brand, you probably have like no salespeople, right? I mean, and there's no relationship. Consumers don't feel they have a relationship with the brand. I see that the contact center agent starts to play that role of like the salesperson, as a consumer, like there's my guy over there at that company that I know I can turn to for help. Even if I only do it like, every once in a blue moon, but like that's going to be the kind of role it is. And that's an exciting role for businesses. They're going to want those people. And it's an exciting role for consumers. After all, like salesperson is, I think I read somewhere, is the number one most common knowledge worker job in the world, right? So this is something a lot of people do, and and this is a new type of that, but I think that's where it's going. And I think that's exciting.
I love where you're going with this because I think we're moving, to your point, from agents being triage to being customer engagement.
That's right.
And we really said they were going to be customer engagement. We don't just want to do support, which is necessary but not sufficient to really have a good customer experience. So I really like that. And just as a quick aside, funny story, speaking about evolving, when I had my first research job, one of the things I needed to do was read a bunch of physical paper, literature, and magazines, type up a summary of that and send it around as like a newsletter for my senior management, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that job has been replaced by the internet, newsletter creation tools, and yet I am still employed, Jonathan. Can you imagine? Right. So here we are, right? So things change, right? And that's great. And one of the things that we will hope will change a little bit, but is not maybe changed as much as we had hoped, is data and data cleanliness, data quality. And I think with AI, you're only as good as your data. And we've talked a lot about the contact center being in a data business since its inception. So can you define what contextual data is and why that might make a difference for organizations as they move into a more engagement-centric CX?
Absolutely. I think this is probably one of the most important differences for generative AI versus prior generations of AI, right? Everyone is sort of used to this idea with AI that you need data to make AI work. Everybody knows that. And everyone understands that you need AI to train the model. Everybody.
More data.
More data, right? Everybody knows that. And that's true. And that's still true in generative AI. But what's happened is these new type of models have created a bifurcation in the data. And that is that we need a ridiculous amount of data to train these models. I mean, literally the entire content of the internet is the data that's required to train something like GPT 3.5 or 4, right? And as the number of vendors that are going to train models like that at that size, there's only a few hyperscalers only are going to be able to create those models. So that raises an interesting question, like, well, hang on a second. I'm used to this idea that I used my own data to train the model for my own purposes. If I'm not now doing like traditional model training with my own data because it's already been trained by OpenAI, how do I make it my own? How do I tailor it to my own use cases? And this is what's new. What's new is GenAI introduces this idea of the prompt, right? Which is literally, if you use these tools, we're all familiar with it. It's the thing you type into the box when you're talking to ChatGPT. It's the question you ask. If you wanted to summarize an article, the use case that you just mentioned, Maribel, that's you type that instruction, you give it the article, and that's your prompt. The data that you feed to the GenAI via that prompt, that's contextual data. And in these simple examples, it wasn't really personalized. It hardly even feels like data. But if you start to apply this thing to enterprise contact centers and CX use cases, you start to see that the way this is going to work is you're going to systems are going to be built, and this is what we're doing here at Five9 with our Genius AI product suite, is we're allowing customers to pull in lots of information and put it into the prompt. And let me make it real with an example. So let's say in the future, Maribel, you call up the contact center, and today it might answer the phone and say, "Thank you for calling Acme Incorporated. We're here to help you. Press 1 for sales, 2 for support." This is like, I roll my eyes. This is like 80% of the contact center sound like that, right? Impersonal, doesn't know you, doesn't know why you're calling, terrible, right? What should it say? I want to be there the day I call up Acme and it says, "Thank you, Jonathan, for calling Acme. We've noticed, we know that you called like the last 3 times worrying about your product return that still hadn't been received. Are you calling today for an update about that return of your widget 3000? And I would say, "Yeah, I'm really interested to know if you guys got it." And it says, "Oh, yes, you're good. It's been received." Whoa. I would love to have that as my greeting to the contact center. What would it take to deliver that? So if I'm using Gen AI as my chatbot, when I call up, it needs to be told in the prompt, the caller is Jonathan Rosenberg. Here's his profile. Here's the products he's purchased. It needs to have a transcript of the last 3 calls I had with it. And, and so it knows that I called the last 3 times with the metadata. When did I call? How long was the call? It needs to know what products I purchased. So we need to have gone in at real time. The moment I called the contact center, it would have fetched data from like the product catalog. It would have fetched the billing and inventory system to know what products I purchased. All of that would be in the prompt, right? And that would be fed to the Gen AI. This customer has just called. Here's all this information. Please interact with the customer. Be sure to greet them personally. Predict why they're calling. Like, this is what the prompt would be. And then you would get the experience I just got. The hard part of all of that is not anymore the Gen AI model part. That's solved. Thank you, OpenAI and Google. And it's now this prompt construction by pulling in all of this stuff I just said, and that's your contextual data. Transcripts and call histories, real-time API information pulled in on demand, knowledge articles, data, product documentation. This is contextual data. The vendors and the enterprises that can collect this contextual data and use them to power generative AI are going to be the winners in the race to deliver amazing CX. Contextual data is the new gold in the era of generative AI.
I'm fully 100% behind you on this one. Years ago, I wrote a book called Right Time Experiences. It was right information, right person, right time. And at that point, I thought we had the technology to do it. We weren't quite there yet. We really hadn't gone into the AI era. It was more of the big data era, but they were going to be contextual experiences that were adaptive. They were learning. They were predictive. And today we actually see that, Gen AI models actually can predict some of what's going to come next. We see a lot of opportunity for assistance with the agent community, agent assisted experiences. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. There's another trend that I think we should also talk about that's happening in the space. And there's really a great deal of discussion about, shall we call it, open and platforms in our industry. I wanted to get your take on, what do you think about this and what's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I answer that one, I actually want to go back to one of the things you said too, which is, that we've been talking about these things in the past, and like we thought we had the technology to do them, and it could be done. It wasn't impossible, right? It's just that it was really expensive, and it only sometimes worked, right? And that's the problem. And with generative AI, it's going to be a lot easier. The implementations and the time for customers to deploy, for enterprises to deploy and use these technologies is dramatically simpler. And they'll be able to do it quick, and it'll be more effective. So it's not just that it wasn't possible before, but what Gen AI is doing is it's bringing it to the masses, right? That there's no reason a contact center with one agent can't have a technology like this. Whereas in the past, like only the biggest of the biggest could afford the multi-million-dollar 6-month AI implementation project that, delivered something like this. So I just wanted to mention that too. But that's a great point. That's a good lead into sort of like, what's the definition of an open platform, especially in this era of generative AI? And to me, there's sort of 2 dimensions to that. Dimension 1 is that it's what we call engine agnostic, right? And what that means is that it's possible to bring in multiple different AI models, GPT-4, GPT 3.5 from OpenAI, or Llama 3 from Facebook, and then you have the Gemini models from Google, and there's a lot of these things. And an open platform in the world of AI is very capable of plugging in these different models. And that's important because I don't know if you notice, these things seem to change like on a weekly basis. It's like literally, it's a crazy race, and it's a race for quality and cost on a scale I have never seen in my entire career. And I'll give you an example. OpenAI launched this GPT-4o mini model a few weeks ago, and they announced the pricing for it. Their tagline was too cheap to meter. It was 1,000 times cheaper than GPT-3 than 4o. I mean, 1,000 times cheaper. We're used to industry price cuts like, oh, it's 10% off. 1,000 times cheaper, and it was like no one even. It was like a sideline announcement. I mean, it's unbelievable on the cost performance improvements. And for customers who want to deploy AI, need some assurance they're not going to like make the wrong bet. Like, oh, I got married to this one thing, and like, oh, everyone else moved on, and I can't take advantage of it, and it's like I have to redo my whole project. You need this layer that abstracts you from that, so that you can swap the engines in and out while keeping all the contextual data, which is foundational to your implementation and your experience. You don't have to do that over again, right? So that's one dimension of open, is sort of the bottom downward towards models. The second one, top up, is especially for CX vendors like ourselves, is we recognize that not everyone is going to choose to buy AI or all AI products and services from us, from Five9. And so what we want to do is we want to provide AI APIs that allow third-party AI applications to have access to the data that is necessary for them to build AI applications on top of our platform. So at Five9, we've pioneered this feature called Voice Stream that provides live voice streaming along with metadata and a modern RESTful API, and more recently Transcript Stream, which allows third-party applications to get access to live transcript between participants in a call, and again, process it in runtime. So, and we have a vendor ecosystem of third-party vendors who sit on top of that platform, many of which compete with our own in-house offerings. And we love that, right? Because customers need choice. So choice in AI applications, choice of AI model, that is the fundamental definition of platform in the era of generative AI.
One of the things we see a lot of organizations looking at was exactly that discussion you were talking about with models. We were basically talking about how the fact that everybody got model happy and they're really focused on like what model. And in some ways, to your point, it's moving very rapidly. And really the power that we need is the ability to put in the right model for the right use case at the right time. And there's this interesting trade-off between accuracy, performance of time, cost that organizations need to balance. And we're also going to start to get to the point where we're looking at more industry-specific models. So if you look at that ability to platform and have that openness that you can insert the right technology, you're actually future-proofing. So I think that's something we've been looking for a while. And in each technology era, we get better at it. So we've done the API thing before, we've tried to do abstraction before, but we're getting to a better place and we're adding much more intelligence into it. So I think that's exciting. Now, since you are an art of the possible guy, as I've known you in the past, I was hoping you could put on your vision hat for a moment and tell me, when does the new CX become a reality? This year, 10 years from now? What are we thinking?
I feel like we're in the handful of years away because of this technology. And, a bunch of things need to happen, right, for us to get there. Vendors like us have to do our work and build platforms that can collect this contextual data and build the products and services that allow our customers to deploy them. The models still need to get to the right place in terms of cost performance for different use cases. Some of them are still actually out of reach from a cost perspective. Others are here today. The biggest thing that's going to gate the timeliness is our getting a control of hallucination, right? This is sort of you know, you got to balance all this excitement with some reality, and the reality that puts the brake on this stuff is hallucination. And we've seen challenges, Maribel, with like everyone's familiar with that airline story where like a chatbot gave the wrong information about some plan, and the vendor was liable for that. And this spooks everybody, right? And I've even had, I'll be honest, like I've had a customer or two tell me they're afraid to put generative AI in front of their customers. They want to use it for internal use cases only, or areas where there's human oversight. Those areas, by the way, those are already exploding, right? And those are great, but they're not the transformative experience. They don't quite deliver the transformative experience we need. To get that transformative experience, the models have to get better at managing hallucination for our use cases. We don't need the general solution. We need it just for contextual data, to not hallucinate on contextual data. And I think that we're getting there, right? And so there's a line of sight to that. So when the models are good enough, the vendors have them integrated, we have the products and services, we have the implementation cycles down, and it's cheap to deploy, we're going to see it explode. And especially if it delivers this amazing experience. I've used this term when we talk about it, which is a 10xer, right? Which is you tend to see not small but rapid changes in technologies when something is 10x better than the thing before it. And when that happens, like industries that move traditionally slowly all of a sudden move really fast. And so it's the self-service capabilities that we've been discussing here and we've been dreaming of. If we can do these with Gen AI, they'll be 10x better. And when something is 10x better and there's proven results, the imperative for every single brand to get on board and deliver that will be so overwhelming that it will absolutely push us rapidly in that direction. Now that's all in the success case, which I'm rooting for. So that's why I think it won't be 10 years if this really works. In a few years, when the tech is really solved all these problems, like it could go really fast.
I agree with that. And I can't believe we got almost all the way to the end of the podcast before the word hallucinations was even mentioned.
That's right.
And when you think about it, we've talked about contextual data, and that's how, we ground our models and get them to be the thing that we need. And that step is so important for organizations. And I think we'll spend what is left of 24 and quite a bit of 25 trying to figure out the best, most effective ways of doing that, working with our technology vendor, someone like you, to actually help us figure out how to do things, some of the models like retrieval, augmented generation, or other things within the stack to help. But there's a lot of opportunity. Like, we understand the problem now, right? And I think that's super important, that once you know that something like a hallucination is an opportunity, you have the opportunity to prevent it. So that's all great. And I guess as we close, there are so many things that you were thinking about and working on, but I was wondering if there was a book or a podcast or an activity that you'd like to recommend to the audience. And it doesn't have to be technically related.
Yeah. That's a good question. So obviously there's all kinds of interesting tech and things, but I'll go far afield from that. And I'm a self-professed super nerd and I'm a big fan of nerd pride. There's nothing to be ashamed of that. I like science fiction, fantasy. I'm a big Marvel MCU guy. I watch Star Trek over and over. I've seen episodes of The Next Generation like 10 times. Like, I'm in on that. So one of the things I've recently read that I thought was like a breath of fresh air and absolutely fabulous is this fantasy trilogy called the Broken Earth trilogy by an author, N.K. Jemisin. And it's this amazing fantasy novel series set in this world where like it's sort of this class divide between people who have this ability to manipulate sort of Earth and they're almost enslaved actually by the rest of the population. And it's an incredible world building experience, great story, amazing plot. Every single book won the Hugo Award, which is, I think, the first time that a book series had each of the 3 books in the trilogy win this top award. And so the author, N.K. Jemisin, she's just a genius. I can't recommend this series enough. So the Broken Earth series, Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. If you haven't read it, nothing to do with AI, but it's a great read.
All right, I'm going to put that link to that into the show notes, and I'm actually going to read it myself. I'm very excited about that. Jonathan, I want to thank you for your time. And if people want to reach you or follow your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So look for me on LinkedIn. Obviously, been doing stuff there. Obviously on social media, Twitter as well. And look for me more on Forbes Technology Council. I'll be doing a bunch of publications there as well. So a lot to look out for.
Great. I didn't know that. I'm actually on Forbes.com as well as a contributor. So I'll look out for you there. Thank you, Jonathan.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you for listening, everybody. And just a reminder, go out and build great things and be good people.
Thank you for listening. Additional content can be found at lopezresearch.com/podcasts. Until next time, wishing you all the best.